first speaker today is Christina DaCosta with SAGE. She will be followed by Colleen Tressler with the Federal Trade Commission, Lisa Schifrelli with Consumer Fraud Protection Bureau, and Lisa Marr with the National Center on Elder Abuse. And I'm really excited to have our colleagues here with us today to present on this very important topic. And with that, I will turn it over to Christina.
Hello, everyone. As Cheryl said, my name is Christina DaCosta. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Chief Experience Officer here at SAGE. I am thrilled to be chatting about SageSense. It's one of my favorite projects here at SAGE. And let's get started. Next, please. Okay, so a little bit about SAGE. SAGE is the world's largest and oldest organization dedicated to improving the lives of LGBTQ+ elders. We were founded in 1978 in New York by a group of gerontology students, actually, who realized that LGBTQ+ elders that they saw around them were not getting the supports and services that they needed. And so they started SAGE, and SAGE has since expanded exponentially. We are, like I said, a national organization, and we do not only work at the local level in New York, where we're headquartered. We have 5 senior centers across New York City. We have 2 LGBTQ+ friendly elder housing facilities in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. And we also offer care management services to all of those folks in New York City and in the state through a variety of our programs. We also have a friendly visitor program, which is the oldest in the country, where we match friendly visitors, volunteers to homebound LGBTQ+ elders to offer the support and services they need. In addition to the work that we do at our headquarters, we work across the country with our SAGE Collab partners, and we advocate with and for LGBTQ+ elders at the state and local level. That is a very broad overview of SAGE. If people want to learn more about the work we do, I highly recommend visiting our website, www.sageusa.org, and you can really see the breadth and power of our programs. Next slide, please. So some facts on LGBTQ+ elders. As the media portrays our community as fabulously wealthy, living in lofts in New York City all the time, reality is something that's very different. So we are twice as likely to be single and live alone, 4 times less likely to have children. Therefore, again, 4 more likely to have faced discrimination and social stigma, and more likely, therefore, to face poverty and homelessness and to have poor health outcomes. All of this results in a number of experiences that lead LGBTQ+ elders to suffer disproportionately to their straight counterparts. So there are high levels of underlying poor health conditions like HIV and diabetes. They experience higher levels of poverty, food and housing insecurity, lower access to healthcare, and they engage less in supportive services. Many experience social isolation and have thinner support networks, and many have a significant mistrust of government and other institutions based on historical and current discrimination and mistreatment. So this all boils down to say a lot of LGBTQ+ elders have experienced a lifetime of discrimination or exclusion in all of the aspects of their lives, but especially in accessing financial resources. So job insecurity, less social capital, added racial disparities provide a whole intersection that lead participants to feel discouraged and have lower expectations about what they can expect when trying to get financial resources. Here are a number of other facts around financial insecurity. As I said before, media portrays this community as very different than reality. 1/3 live at or below the 200% of the federal poverty level. 50% of single LGBTQ+ elders believe they have to work well beyond retirement age, compared to 27% of single non-LGBTQ+ elders. And 51% are concerned about having enough money to live on, as compared to 36% of non-LGBTQ plus people. Elder same-sex partner household have 37.4% less income. I can go on. And transgender people in the US are more than twice as likely to live in poverty as non-transgender people. And transgender people of color are more than 3 times as likely. So these are just some of the facts on LGBTQ plus elders and financial insecurity. And it really shows us a picture of a community that is under-resourced and is something that SAGE really is trying to change. Next slide, please. And that's why we have this solution called SageSense. It is a free financial wellness app designed with and for LGBTQ plus elders. SageSense is a partnership with Sage, Wells Fargo, and LifeSense. It is a web and mobile-based app, so you can use it on your computer, you could use it on your phone. It is mobile-friendly, doesn't have an app on the App Store, but it functions like an app, and it provides financial education to our consumers. And we launched in COVID. We launched August 14th of 2020, and we saw a lot of need for the program and did a lot of research leading up to its launch. That's why I said designed with and for LGBTQ plus elders, because we really made it a point to do a lot of research with our community to see what they actually needed to be financially resilient and learn more about their finances. Next slide. So this is how it works. It's very easy, and folks are encouraged, if you are a member, amazing. If you're not and you're very curious, please feel free to sign up. I see someone's not getting sound in the chat, so if I'm not being heard, Cheryl, let me know somehow. I'll give that a second. I can hear. Okay. Good luck to the person who cannot hear. I'm really sorry. I'll keep going on how it works. So people can sign up at sageusa.org/SageSense. And you get started very easily. It's a chat system, so it's very user-friendly, very conversational. It will walk you through the sign-up process. And then it has a whole gamification system that makes the process easy and fun to provide the resources that people need. And I will go more into that as we go into the next slide. Oops, I shouldn't have gone to next slide, but I'll keep talking. The way the app works is that people sign up, you go through the sign up process, and then by submitting your answers, the app will automatically make suggestions, right? So we've definitely found that folks tend to steer towards different topics, and that then helps them with either budgeting, finding a financial counselor, perhaps they want more information on Medicaid or Medicare resources. And so as you answer questions and move through the app, it finds resources that are tailored to your interests. Now, next slide. And here's what we found since 2020. We have nearly 2,500 users from every single state, including Puerto Rico, which is amazing. In terms of savings, 45% of users report increasing their savings by at least $200, which again, if you remember the facts on one of the earlier slides, is actually a very significant amount. 54% of users report reducing debt by at least $200. And in terms of credit scores, 39.4% report at least a 25 point increase in their credit score, which is also pretty significant. Next slide. We have some information on our users. I want to point out that in terms of privacy, none of this information, user-generated information, names, or anything like that gets sent to Wells Fargo. This is just for Sage and LifeSense to absorb and make sure that we're providing the right resources for people. So anyone who has concerns about privacy issues, that's where those land. We do not share information with any third parties. It is for Sage to really develop the resources that are needed and also learn more about what people need. So we've learned that our users, the average age is 63 years old. With relationship status, 41% are single, 21% are married, 12% are partnered, and 8% have children. Next slide. And a major goal of the app is to really reach our diverse LGBTQ plus community. We've embarked on a number of campaigns to really reach into different markets, particularly those who are BIPOC, trans and non-binary, TGNB, and who live in rural areas. So we have 28% are older adults of color, 14% of users have a gender identity other than male or female, and 22% live in rural areas. Next slide, please. So in terms of lessons learned, as the app has grown since 2020, is that close to 20% have reported feeling less financially stable due to COVID. And so we are connecting those users to free financial coaches with the AFCPE. Many don't have advanced planning docs. So living will, your healthcare proxy, your last will and testament, that's a major gap we see in our users. So we directly link them to safe sites to create these documents that are binding. And 43% don't feel confident navigating through Medicare, which is a huge amount. So we've increased our efforts in terms of Medicare education and assistance to provide new resources when available, as well as pushing out the current resources that we do have. Next slide. This is Donna Sue, one of our SageSense users who's agreed to be a testimonial. And I will read this out because I believe it's really powerful. As a Black lesbian, it's always been a struggle to deal with the misogyny, racism, and homophobia that's embedded in our world. While these obstacles have continued to cause challenges for those of us I like to call owls, which I love, older wise lesbians, I never thought they would affect my finances, but since I signed up for SageSense, I've been learning about how my experiences as a member of the LGBT community have influenced my financial journey, which is true. As we, again, those stats from the beginning, a lifetime of discrimination really leads to financial disparities later on in life. Next slide, please. And this is Ed Miller, who reports, I worked part-time at the Kimmel Center, Performing Arts Center in Philadelphia, but I lost that job during the pandemic. With less income and getting older, I thought I really needed to take a look at my finances. I signed up and I had 2 calls with a woman who has really been great. We're creating a new budget for me. She also asked me to pick short-term goals that are easy to achieve in the next week and long-term goals. Ed was connected with a financial counselor, and that's how he means by having a phone call with somebody who could really help him lay out his challenges and plan for the future. Next slide. So I say this at the end, sign up. It's never too late to get started on your financial wellness journey. I have signed up for SageSense and have gone through the modules. I find it very helpful just in terms of even talking about finances. It's considered taboo. It's hard to do. There can be a lot of shame around it. And that's why this app was created. It's to take out that stigma, allow folks a safe place to be themselves, to share their identity, and to get the resources that they need to thrive. And next slide. And thank you. Thank you all very much. Feel free to get in touch. That's my contact information. I'm also going to include a SageSense informational video in the chat that was supposed to be shared, but we had some technical difficulties. And I give it over to, let's see, Colleen.
Great, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. And I just want to let you know I prefer the she, her pronouns. My name is Colleen Tressler. I'm with the FTC's Division of Consumer and Business Education. Our mission is to educate people about their rights and how to avoid scams, what to do if they've been targeted, and where to report these scams. LGBTQ+ older adults are an important part of every community. That's why the FTC is actively engaging with community partners and organizations to build important connections and deliver consumer education designed to help LGBTQ+ older adults recognize, avoid, and report fraud. This kind of outreach is part of our larger Every Community initiative, a campaign that the FTC has worked on since 2014. Next slide, please. Today, I'd like to talk about one of the FTC's newer education campaign, Money Matters: How to Spot, Avoid, and Report Scams, and how you can use these resources in both your personal and professional lives. But first, I'd like to talk about some of the frauds and scams reported to the FTC in 2022, because you'll soon see the connection to the Money Matters topic areas. Next, please. LGBTQ+ older adults face many of the same consumer issues as everyone else, but there are also unique challenges. But the FTC finds that talking about fraud with someone you trust can help you avoid the scam, and of course, reporting the scam to the FTC helps us stop the scams and bad practices impacting the LGBTQ+ community. Last year, the FTC got fraud reports from 2.4 million people. The most commonly reported fraud was impersonator scams, followed by online shopping scams, prizes, sweepstakes, and lotteries, investment-related reports, and business and job opportunities rounded out the top 5 fraud categories. While the number of fraud reports to the FTC was down last year, the amount people lost is up. People reported losing $8.8 billion to scams in 2022. That's an increase of 30% over the previous year. Next slide, please. As I said, impersonator scams remained the most reported scam, with reported losses of $2.6 billion. And to put it simply, an impersonator is just pretending to be someone you trust, maybe a company you know, a government agency, or even a family member or friend. They use that sense of trust to get what they really want, your money or personal information. So what do these impersonator scams look like? A caller might say they're from a government agency and say you owe taxes, or maybe even that you qualify for a grant. You might get a text that looks like it's from a company you know, saying a package is lost or your account has been frozen and giving you a link to click. Or it might seem like a family member or friend in trouble calling, saying they need money right away. But these are all scammers who want your money or personal information. They try to be convincing and create a sense of urgency so you don't have time to think before you act. Here are some ways to avoid impersonator scams. First, no matter what the story is, slow down. If you get an unexpected call or message, stop. Talk to someone you trust before you do anything. Both research and experience say that talking about scams is one of the best ways to avoid them. Second, never give your personal information to anyone who contacts you out of the blue. Government agencies won't call, email, text, or message you on social media to ask for personal information like your social security or bank account numbers. Neither will legit businesses. If someone does, that's a scam. And know that only scammers will tell you to pay with cryptocurrency, a gift card, or a wire transfer service like Western Union or MoneyGram. And third, don't trust caller ID, which might show an actual government agency or company's name and phone number. Unfortunately, caller ID is easy for scammers to fake, so don't trust it. Next, please. Investment scams were huge last year, with reported losses of $3.8 billion. That's more than people lost to any other scam, and more than double the loss reported in 2021. Investment scams start with a promise that might sound great, but it's a lie. Someone might call, text, or email you and say, you can make lots of money quickly with little or no risk. There are lots of different types of investment scams, but most of them start with that bogus claim. One of the most common investment scams right now are cryptocurrency scams. They'll often start on Instagram and Facebook, sometimes even on dating sites. Wherever they find you, someone promises you easy money and quick returns by investing in crypto. Combine the lure of big money with how little most of us understand about cryptocurrency, and you wind up with big losses. Crypto investment scams on dating sites were actually a new angle last year. An online love interest pretending to be a successful business person or investor might start talking about how they found their financial freedom with crypto investments and then encourage you to start investing. In fact, they'll offer to help you and will lean in on a fear of missing out. But it's all a lie, and if you gave them money to invest, it went straight into that scammer's pocket. There are a few good ways to avoid investment scams. First, remember, there are just no guarantees with investments. If someone promises you big money or guarantees profits, you know they're lying, and that's a scam. You also don't want to make investments because you got an out-of-the-blue call, text, or email. No matter how good it sounds or how amazing the promise is, walk away. That's a scam. And we've seen the dangers of mixing online dating and investments, so don't do it. If anyone on a dating site or app wants to talk with you about cryptocurrency, or they ask you to send some, that's a scam. Next slide, please. And that brings us back to Money Matters. This campaign grew out of the financial impact of the pandemic, which continues to be far-reaching. And as the data from 2022 shows, many of us are still feeling it in many ways. Chances are you know someone who is looking for a place to live, searching for a job, applying for a loan, buying a car, or facing another consequential dollars and cents decision. You can help them spot, avoid, and report financial scams by sharing free multimedia resources available at ftc.gov/moneymatters, which is also available in Spanish at ftc.gov/asuntos de dinero. Like all our education resources, the information at Money Matters is here when and where you and your friends, family, colleagues, and clients need it, on your phone or computer. You'll find all these resources on the site, but I want to make a special note about the PowerPoint presentations. You don't have to be an expert on the topic areas covered. Our presentations are fully scripted, so you can feel comfortable and confident presenting the information. You can then use the related articles and the promotional bookmark as takeaways for people who want more information. All our consumer education materials are in the public domain. If you'd like to add your organization's name or logo, we can share design files for just that purpose. Next slide, please. ftc.gov/moneymatters has these 8 topic areas related to significant dollars and cents decisions and where people have felt the financial hit of the pandemic. For example, if you work with people who are worried about their credit, the section on credit reports will give you the resources to get them help and know how to check, read, and fix their credit report if they find problems. Or say you're looking for a job or know someone who is. Unfortunately, we see time and again how scammers target you through ads online, on job boards, and even in search results. But at Money Matters, you'll find the information you need to protect yourself and those you care about. We can probably come up with more stories about the scams we've all seen in these areas, or if not scams, how tricky it can be to get through the car buying process, for example. I hope these materials help you and the people you know get the latest information to spot, avoid, and report scams. Next slide, please. Earlier, I mentioned the number of people who reported scams to the FTC last year. We know that's a low number because for a lot of reasons, many people don't report fraud. Maybe they're embarrassed to admit they've been scammed or feel ashamed. That might be a feeling that's familiar to all of us. And those feelings can make it challenging to talk about fraud and losing money, and even more difficult to report it to the authorities. But let me tell you why it's so important to report your experiences to the FTC. We use reports to help find and build cases, and to help target education and outreach. But telling your story can also help your friends, family, and community avoid scams. The more we talk about the scams that target our communities, the more likely we are to spot and avoid them. That keeps money in our pockets and our information out of the hands of criminals. It's easy to tell your story at reportfraud.ftc.gov. Once you do, you'll get advice on how to recover if you paid a scammer and how to protect yourself against fraud. Next slide, please. I mentioned at the start of my presentation that partners are a powerful way to spread the word. When people learn about scams from people they trust, they're less likely to lose money to fraud. We encourage you to use these materials when giving presentations to clients and community organizations. It's easy with ready-to-go presentations on everything from shopping to prize scams. Order free materials at ftc.gov/bulk order. Share them with family, friends, colleagues, and clients. We'll ship them to you for free. Subscribe to the FTC's Consumer Alerts and encourage others to do so. Alerts will be delivered right to your email inbox and will keep you up to date with the latest scams. Next slide, please. We also encourage you to share resources on social media. Money Matters features graphics and videos in English and Spanish designed for just that purpose. And here are 2 examples. We hope that whatever you do, you'll spread the word if you think you spot a scam. Again, talking about the scams we see is the best way for us and those we care about not to pay a scammer. Next slide, please. I hope you found this presentation informative and are thinking about ways you can use Money Matters resources in your life. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Lisa Schifferle at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Thanks so much, Colleen. What a great presentation. And hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Schifferle. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior policy analyst in the Office for Older Americans at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Today, for honor our LGBTQ+ Elders Day, I'm going to share a few items from the CFPB that we hope will be particularly relevant to the financial well-being of LGBTQ+ older adults. I'm going to talk about our financial well-being scale, as well as our report on recovery from elder financial exploitation, and then share a couple resources. Before I begin, I have to give this disclaimer, which basically just says that anything I say is my own opinion and not necessarily the opinion of the CFPB. So let's talk about the CFPB's financial well-being scale and some findings related to the scale that relate particularly to LGBTQ+ older adults. Next slide, please. And the following slide, please. Thank you. So let me tell you a little bit about this scale. We conducted open-ended one-on-one interviews with a broadly diverse group of adults around the United States, ages 18 to 95. And from those interviews, we developed the definition that you see at the top of this slide. This definition on the slide is how we look at financial well-being, which is a state of being that reflects a person's ability to meet current and ongoing financial obligations, feel secure in their financial future, and make choices that allow them to enjoy life. As you'll see, it includes 4 concepts. 2 relate to security and the ability to meet day-to-day needs, both now and in the future. And then 2 other elements relate to freedom, financial freedom, being able to do the things you enjoy, and also being able to save for the future for big ticket items, like maybe buying a house, a car, opening a business, or paying a child or grandchild's college tuition. So you can see from this slide that financial well-being is an inherently subjective concept. It's not how much money the person actually has, but rather how the person feels about their financial situation. On the next slide, you'll see the questions that we used. If you could go back a slide, please, there. You can see the questions that we used in order to come up with a financial well-being scale. These are the questions we asked people. This is the first publicly available, validated, and tested tool to measure consumer sense of financial well-being. And it gives you an idea of the types of questions we ask and then the response options we give people in order to see how they feel about their financial situation. Now, the next slide talks more about the scores. Basically, from people's answers to those scores, we come up with a number between 0 to 100, with higher values indicating higher levels of financial well-being. So if you are on the high end of the score range, those are individuals who have consistent financial security. They're not so concerned about how a financial shock could impact their monthly finances, and they can enjoy their lives without jeopardizing their present or future financial well-being. The lower score ranges, on the other hand, are individuals who experience the most severe financial and material hardships, including housing and food insecurity. Now on the next slide, you'll see some information about LGBTQ+ older adults' financial well-being and how that compares. So as you'll see, LGBTQ+ older adults are less likely to have a high or very high financial well-being, 55% compared to 62% of all older adults. In addition, LGBTQ+ older adults are more likely to have low or very low financial well-being score, 13% compared to 8% of older adults. And those stats may go back to some of the factors that you heard Christina talking about earlier in the presentation. But let's look a little closer on the next slide about some specific financial experiences of LGBTQ+ older adults based on the CFPB's financial well-being scale. On this chart, the dark green bar represents LGBTQ+ older adults, while the light green bar represents all older adults. And 3 stars show the most statistically significant differences. So I'll just highlight some of those for you. Some of the most important differences were that more LGBTQ+ older adults reported difficulty paying bills in a particular month. That's 31% compared to 26% overall. More also reported being contacted by debt collectors, 11% versus 7%. And in terms of wealth, fewer LGBTQ+ older adults reported having emergency savings, 65% versus 69%. So that's somewhat close. Fewer reported having a retirement plan, 50 versus 57%, and far fewer reported owning a home, 65% versus 79%. On the next slide, you'll see more about our financial well-being scale. I just brought out some of the highlights of the scale, but you can go to this link below and you can answer the questions yourself and find out what your financial well-being score is. It only takes about 30 seconds to a minute to do, and then you can compare it to other populations based on age and based on other factors. So I would encourage you to check out that financial well-being scale at consumerfinance.gov/financial-well-being. Now, the next item I want to highlight is the CFPB's report on recovering from elder financial exploitation. Next slide, please. And the following slide. This is our report that we call Recovering from Elder Financial Exploitation, a Framework for Policy and Research. And basically, it focuses on the factors that affect when and whether people are able to financially recover from elder financial exploitation. In other words, how likely are you to get your money back if you've been scammed or financially exploited? You can see there the link to find this report, but I want to highlight a few of the findings that we got in doing our report. So on the next slide, you'll see that our report's based on interviews with consumers and professionals about what affects whether older adults do get their money back when they lose it to elder financial exploitation. Based on our interviews, we identified 4 phases, each of which has different factors that affect whether people get their money back. There is identifying that the fraud occurred, reporting it, investigation, and then return of the funds. So let's look at each of those in a little more detail. In terms of identification, there are several factors that our interviews identified as affecting whether people actually identify and recognize that elder financial exploitation has occurred. Next slide, please. One of them is the method of the transaction. If it's by credit card, then people are more likely to recover. People's personal financial situation can come into play. So someone with limited income may be more likely to notice any amount of money lost, whereas someone with more might not notice it. And so you can also see how the financial well-being scale and the differential between LGBTQ+ older adults' financial well-being might play into this too. Another factor is whether the older adult knew the perpetrator, whether it's a stranger or not, and the person's own health, including physical and cognitive health, may affect whether they actually realize that a fraud or scam or financial exploitation has occurred. On the next slide, you'll see the factors affecting reporting. And this goes back to something that we heard from Christina earlier in the presentation. There are a lot of factors that we found that affect reporting across the board. There are financial factors, again, like the method and amount of the transaction, because maybe the credit card company will flag things, whether the victim knew the perpetrator, the shame and embarrassment that Christina mentioned that some people feel that can affect people's desire to report. And one thing that we found was faith in authorities played a big role. And we heard especially from LGBTQ+ people and people of color who had had prior negative experiences with local police that they didn't want to get the police involved in this situation either. So that can be a factor that affects reporting. And of course, if you don't report the elder financial exploitation, it's less likely to be investigated and you're ultimately less likely to get the money back. So let's look at the next stage of recovery, which is investigation. And whether the case gets investigated, there are a lot of the same factors that we heard at the other stages, but a couple factors unique to investigation are the complexity of the investigation. If it's really complex with overseas defendants, it might not get investigated. Also, if the amount of loss is low, it might be a lower priority to investigators, even if it's a high priority to the individual. And finally, investigators' training and resources affect whether an investigation proceeds. And that can include training and resources about how to deal with different populations as well. Let's look on the next slide about return of funds, the last factor that we, or the last stage that we talk about in terms of our framework for recovery from elder financial exploitation. And there are several factors that play in at this stage of recovery. They're all here on the slide, and a lot of them are the same as the factors we mentioned earlier about the method and amount of the transaction, health, physical, and cognitive. But some things I want to mention unique to this stage are that sometimes it depends on the perpetrator's ability to repay. Professionals especially noted that oftentimes by the time the perpetrator's caught, the money's gone, and they may not have other assets to repay the older adult with. Also, people noted that, prosecutors in particular noted that, especially for an older adult, even if you get to this final stage and the court orders repayment, sometimes it's a repayment plan with small amounts over the period of years. And for some older adults, waiting years for repayment may sadly mean they pass away before a substantial amount of the money is repaid. So this outlines some of the factors that affect whether people get their money back. You can read the full report for additional factors and information. And we do note in there too that more research and policy needs to be done based on these findings, including looking more in depth at specific populations such as LGBTQ+ older adults. So we hope that others will take this and build on it as well in their own research and policy making. Now on the next slide, I want to tell you a little bit about some other resources that relate to scam prevention and financial caregiving. You heard about some great resources from the FTC, and the CFPB also has some excellent resources that can help you prevent elder financial exploitation and scams. You can find them at consumerfinance.gov/older-Americans. We have the Money Smart for Older Adults campaign, which includes an instructor guide and a resource guide, as well as PowerPoints that are scripted for you. And we also have fraud prevention handouts that you can use. I'll show you a little more about those on the next slide. You'll see our Money Smart for Older Adults campaign. These resources are available in English and in Spanish. And if you do trainings, you can use the instructor guide to guide you and then hand out the resource guide to people. And you also have the PowerPoint that helps you. On the next slide, you'll see those fraud prevention placemats that I talked about in handouts. And you may have seen in a recent FTC blog that while romance scams do affect everyone, there are some that target LGBTQ plus dating sites in particular. So this may be one of the placemats you may want to take a look at or order to hand out and distribute. It just talks about romance scams and how to recognize and avoid them. And on the next slide, I want to tell you a little bit about our Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Network Development Guide. Some of you may have been part of our LGBTQ plus network convening about a year ago. We were very happy to partner with SAGE and FTC and NCEA on that event as well. We have a network development guide. These elder fraud prevention networks are networks that are in local communities to help prevent elder fraud and elder abuse, working together with APS, law enforcement, and others in the community. We usually did them based on geographic region, but we did this national convening of LGBTQ plus network members last year, and we are happy to build on that and offer this network development guide. On the next slide, you'll see our contact information if you are interested in becoming a part of a network, whether in your community or a nationwide type network. You can email us at eldernetworks@cfpb.gov, or if there's not a network in your area but you want to help start one, please reach out to us as well, and we're happy to help. The last thing I want to share are our financial caregiving resources. We have heard from some LGBTQ plus older adults that this is an issue that is of particular interest, at least to those who don't have grown children who they can easily name as their financial caregiver. What do they do and what guidance is there? So we have guides for people who are serving as agents under power of attorney, as guardians, conservators, trustees, and more. And these are those guides that are available. On the next slide, you'll also see Considering a Financial Caregiver, Know Your Options, that is designed for people earlier in the process who want to know about their informal and formal caregiving options, and a quiz to help you think about who to choose as your financial caregiver. So those can all be helpful resources available in English and in Spanish. Finally, on the last slide here, you'll see some of the links that we put down before. Where you can find the report that I mentioned, where you can find all our resources at consumerfinance.gov/olderamericans, and you can always contact us at olderamericans@cfpb.gov. So I hope that all these resources that I shared will help you all help others in your community to avoid elder financial exploitation and even to recover from elder financial exploitation when it happens. So thank you, and we'll be back at the end to answer questions, but for now, I'll pass it over to Lori.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Mars, Deputy Director of the National Center on Elder Abuse, and I'm very happy to be with you all today on LGBTQ plus Elders Day. I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about the National Center on Elder Abuse. We're one of 9 elder justice resource centers funded by the Administration for Community Living. We're housed at the Keck School of Medicine of USC and provide the latest information and resources on research, training, policy, and best practices on intervention in elder mistreatment. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, again. Our goal, thank you. Our goal is to improve the national response to elder abuse through our comprehensive data repository, the synthesis and dissemination of evidence-based practices, and state and national collaborations to support elder rights and justice. We recognize that as a society and as individuals, we must increase our efforts to ensure that all older adults are treated with dignity and respect. Next slide, please. Today, I'd like to discuss the risk factors for elder maltreatment generally, and then propose an approach to identify the risk factors specific to financial fraud and scams, and the impact on LGBTQ plus elders. Why examine the risk factors? Because when we understand the risks that may be associated with maltreatment, we can potentially mitigate those risks and therefore reduce exposure to abuse. One way we view risk is through the Abuse Prevention Intervention Model, which we call the AIM model. The model was developed by geriatrician Dr. Laura Mosqueda, Director of the National Center on Elder Abuse, and geropsychologist Dr. Bonnie Olson of the Keck School of Medicine. The framework helps us organize and make sense of the potential risks and identify mechanisms for intervention. The AIM model has been applied in a number of different contexts, including with civil attorneys, medical providers, law enforcement, and most recently with judges. The model proposes 3 domains to analyze potentially abusive situations: the vulnerable older adult, the trusted other, and the context of their relationship. In this triad, the trusted other is family, chosen family, or someone close to the older adult. Within each domain, there are factors or vulnerabilities that independently and in combination with other factors may be associated with an increased risk of abuse. In the vulnerable older adult domain, risk factors include chronic medical and mental health conditions, cognitive impairment, frailty, functional deficits, social isolation, and poor coping mechanisms. And many of these factors are mirrored in the trusted other domain, but additional risk factors for trusted other include substance abuse and economic and/or emotional dependence on the vulnerable older adult. The contextual factors include the relationship or joint history between the older adult and trusted other. For example, a family or chosen family caregiving relationship may be strained, resulting from a history of conflictual dynamics going back years, or it may become eroded with increasing care recipient disease needs and caregiver burden. Cultural factors may also impact maltreatment or perceptions of maltreatment, and the degree of social connectedness and community integration for both the older adult and the trusted other are also relevant to assess potential risk and protective factors. So now that we've identified the risk factors, we can classify each one as modifiable or non-modifiable. For those factors that are modifiable, we can intervene. We can make changes to mitigate exposure to harm. For example, we know that social isolation is associated with an increased risk of abuse. So if we strengthen someone's social supports and resources, perhaps with community or faith-based services, we may be able to reduce their exposure to potential harm. For a trusted other who may have a substance abuse issue, if treatment is provided, that may be an opportunity to decrease the risk of abuse as well. Conversely, where the risk factor is non-modifiable, there may be little we can do. Yet even in those instances, there may be some opportunity for intervention. For example, we know that dementia is a progressive degenerative condition with no cure, but perhaps there are behavioral therapies, therapeutic remedies, or medications that may mitigate the impact and diffuse the agitators that may be associated with abuse. Next slide, please. Now that we've discussed the core organizational framework, I'd like to propose translating the model to the context of a fraud or scam. Factors that may expose an older adult to harm remain the same. The trusted other is the domain that would change. In the original or traditional model, the trusted other is family, chosen family, or a trusted person known to the older adult generally. Frauds and scams, on the other hand, involve strangers. But we do know that fraudsters try to artificially manufacture and cultivate a trust-like relationship with their targets using several mechanisms. They often use misrepresentation as their currency that they veil themselves in to demonstrate ostensible authority to secure trust. The characteristics and conduct of the trusted other would include misrepresenting facts, asserting putative authority, instilling fear or threats, or in the case of a romance scam, flattery or charm, extracting immediate time-sensitive responses, inducing heightened emotions, securing confidence and reliance, fostering secrecy, appealing to identified or acknowledged insecurities, and fostering trust and intimacy. And through these techniques, offenders can fabricate a trusted presence, and they trade on that trust to misappropriate money, property, or assets of the older person. Collateral consequences may include psychological or emotional distress and even health consequences. The context, or the third domain, is characterized by the dyad's relationship, the relationship between the older adult and trusted other. But this includes fear, immediacy, secrecy, and heightened intensity of emotion. Culture, identity, trauma histories all factor into this model as well. Offenders bank on that fear, shame, and embarrassment that resonate for many elders that both Lisa and Christina referenced earlier. Next slide, please. According to the AARP, older LGBTQ+ people are more likely than their straight counterparts in their age group to experience social isolation, financial insecurity, and discrimination, all risk factors for fraud. And Christina referenced some of these facts. I'll just briefly recount a couple. In an AARP survey of over 2,000 LGBTQ+ Americans 45 and older, 8 in 10 said they were not sure they would have adequate family or social supports in later life. More than half of the respondents, 52%, said they felt left out, lacked companionship, or felt lonely. Many LGBTQ+ elders are estranged from their biological families. They're twice as likely to live alone and 4 times as less likely to have children on average, according to SAGE. They don't have that protective sheath that may be available to others with supports, and this makes community members vulnerable to fraud. LGBTQ+ elders seeking companionship may be particularly vulnerable to romance scams. Returning to the A model, the risk factors present in each of the 3 domains may indicate heightened risk and potential for abuse for LGBTQ+ elders. Scammers recognize the risk factors, use the characteristics cited in the purported trusted other domain, and use contextual factors like fear of disclosure, trauma histories, and reluctance to report to scam older LGBTQ+ people. An awareness of the risk factors, especially for modifiable risks, can create opportunities for awareness and intervention. And you heard Christina, Colleen, and Lisa reference a number of those interventions and preventions that can be utilized. Next slide, please. So turning to additional interventions, we know that LGBTQ+ elders have experienced discrimination that make them less likely to connect with senior centers, meal programs, and other support services. This limited access to affirming, accessible, and culturally competent aging services compounds difficulties in aging. And this is especially true for LGBT elders, many of whom are alone and lacking supports within aging and elder service domains. Providers are frequently unaware of the specific needs of LGBTQ+ elders. These deficits in cultural understanding and sensitivity by agencies can inhibit the provision of essential resources and deprive LGBTQ+ elders of medical, housing, and social supports. So it's critical that engagement and resources are culturally appropriate. The NCA developed an information tip sheet that you can see for you on the screen, together with SAGE and San Diego State University. The tip sheet is intended as a first step in engaging with LGBTQ+ communities. It's meant to be combined with staff education and training to instill cultural awareness and confidence in service providers to ask appropriate questions about client sexual orientation and gender identity. By asking clients about their sexual orientation and gender identity during intake, assessment, interviews, and service planning, elder justice network providers can better serve the needs of older LGBTQ+ people. Inclusive engagement is a necessary step in not only providing appropriate person-centered resource referrals that meet individual needs, but promoting the safety and dignity of LGBT+ communities. As you can see, or maybe it's a little too small to see, but on the right-hand side of the screen, there are sample questions that can be utilized as templates. Next slide, please. So I'd like to let you all know that today the NCA published a great blog written by Cheryl Wayland. It's entitled Honoring LGBTQ+ Elders, the Right to a Life Free of Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation. I would encourage you all to read it. Next slide, please. This June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Please access our microsite, and I'll provide some links in the chat for ways that individuals, organizations, and communities can engage in this campaign. Next slide, please. And on the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, we will be holding a webinar, Trauma-Informed Practices to Address Abuse and Build Resilience. We have an amazing lineup of presenters who are engaging in real conversation on this topic, including Cheryl Wayland. Please sign up through our website, though I'll also put a link in the chat. Next slide, please. And here's a QR code for you to enter the, what we call WeAd site. You can quickly find resources. and links to the webinar as well. I'd like to next slide, please. I'd like to thank you all very much for providing me the opportunity to present, and now I'll turn it back to Cheryl.
I am still on mute. Thank you all for joining us today. We actually have about 3 minutes left, and I would just like to invite each one of the panelists to join us back on the screen. We will be taking an opportunity to upload all the questions that were answered in the Q&A today. We'll upload those as well as questions that we collected through the registration, and have a Q&A sheet that will live on our website at lgbtagingcenter.org. So you'll be able to find the Q&A as well as the recording in our featured section on the website. And you'll get an email tomorrow also directing you to that. So with the couple of minutes that are left, I would just like to thank each one of our panelists and offer them each an opportunity to share any closing thoughts that you have. Christina, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, fellow panelists. That was really great. And I just wanted to encourage everyone on the on this Zoom right now, if you're interested in SageSense, you do not have to be LGBTQ+ to use it. It is open to all, and it's really a very easy and kind of fun way to just explore your finances in a very easy, appreciative, and an open way, non-judgmental, which we know is really important in dealing with your finances. So thank you all. I encourage you to go take a look. I'll put it in the chat. And thank you, Cheryl, for great moderation.
Thank you. Colleen.
I too want to thank all my co-presenters today. I hope the audience found our information informative. I wanted to let people know that ftc.gov/money matters, while it grew out of the pandemic, it is not a static website. We are going to be adding to it constantly as we learn more, we see more, we hear more. So you might want to bookmark the site, and we'll be adding PowerPoint presentations as well. But for every one of those 8 categories that you saw, there's at least one PowerPoint presentation. So stay tuned.
Lisa.
Yes, I just also want to echo what everyone else has said, and thank Sage for hosting this, and thank all the co-presenters for being a part of it, because this is all about working together to stop elder financial exploitation. And this is one of many great ways to do it. And I hope people will check out consumerfinance.gov/elder networks to become more involved in networks in their communities, so we can continue this great work together.
And Lori, bring us home.
Okay. I just want to thank Cheryl and Sage for putting this all together. We really appreciated the opportunity to present at this forum. And we would encourage anyone who has any questions, please reach out to the National Center on Elder Abuse, and please join us for our World Elder Abuse Awareness Day activities.
Thank you all once again for joining us today as we honor our LGBTQ+ older adults who have really done so much to pave the way for the equality that we enjoy today, and continue to push us forward for the fight for LGBTQ+ rights into the future. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.